There's a story behind this desk. We went to a barn sale, is what the sign said. And in the front of this open-faced barn was this desk. And it was sitting where the weather could get to it. But the drawers slide in and out, and everything fits, and it seems solid. It's built out of solid wood with some veneer on top of it. I think they did that for grain pattern. But the finish itself, pretty destroyed. We asked the guy how much he wanted for the desk. He said, if you haul it off, you can have it. I guess he'd tried to sell it before, and because it's kind of heavy, nobody could really pick it up and take it. So I got a couple of my sons to help me pick it up and put it in the back of a pickup truck, and we took it home for free. Finish is dead, wood is good. One of the problems I had is on the front of the drawers where they had been wet, the veneer kind of buckled a little bit. So I didn't know what to do with that. So I got some glue down in there and I covered the drawer with wax paper, mostly so it wouldn't stick to the clamps. And I clamped a board to the front of it, cranked it down until that glue dried. And I did it on all the drawers that had issues. While those dried, I started sanding the finish off. Now the stuff that was scaly and weathered came off super easy, but the rest of it did not. It was hardcore. So I tried a couple of different strippers to try to get the finish off of there. One worked better than the other, but overall a little bit of work and some scraping and some goop, and I got most of that off of there. It does make a mess. I did a lot of sanding. Even on the drawers, I tried to use a wire brush on a drill to kind of get in between there and smooth them out. There were a couple that were more weathered than others. I did a lot of this. And this. And this. And this. You get the idea. While I was doing this, my sander came to life in the background and jumped off the desk. Hit the floor. And if you've ever dropped a random orbit sander, it's not very good for it. It eventually came apart. So I used primer as an undercoat, and I know what a lot of people are going to say is, how could you possibly do that to that wood? But I'm doing this because my wife asked me to do it a certain way, and I had my doubts when I started it, but I really ended up liking it when it was all done. After the coat of primer, I put 2 coats of this black. So I drilled 2 holes, a small one and a large one, to hold the knobs, so I could paint those. And I just ran a screw underneath, a screw that actually went with the knob. They're all flathead. And that way I could hold that board and paint those knobs. And they had a place to sit while they dried. One of the biggest problems I had were these edges. Getting down in all those little crevices or creases and getting everything out of there was difficult. The best luck I had was taking my paint scraper and wrapping sandpaper around it and trying to get down in there. That did the best job. So I'm using a wipe-on poly, and I had never used one before. And I kind of thought it would go on like an oil would. So I poured it on and spread it around with wiping. But this stuff was really thick. I think it was too thick to be wipe-on poly because it did not go on very well at all. It ended up looking terrible after a couple of coats. Maybe I should have looked up what to do with that before I actually did it.
That was wrong.
So I sanded down the finish. I didn't go all the way back down, but I sanded it down to where it was smooth again, so I could kind of start over with it. And this time I actually watched a John Hines video where he brushed it on and then wiped it off, and it seemed to work really well. Now this is still thicker than what I think he was using, but doing this definitely gave it a little better finish. And then when I put the next coat on, I went back and forth sideways instead of trying to do that diagonal grain, because it was really hard to make all those meet in the middle without some sort of overlap that made it kind of messy. So when I went side to side on the last coat, it definitely looked a whole lot better than it had before. And while that dried, I started putting the first coat of black on the body of the desk. There's a lot of little intricate parts that take a lot of time to paint. So I spent a whole lot of time sitting on a furniture dolly, rolling around in the garage. That was super satisfying to do, although that was a mistake that I found later. As you can see, I painted the inside where the drawers slide. That was part of that same mistake. We'll get to that in a little bit. But I put a second coat of black on, and about 100 years later, it was all painted and looked pretty good. Here's where I ran into that problem. I painted the sides of those drawers and the inside of where the drawer slides, and of course, now it doesn't slide anymore. This desk sat in our garage for a while, and it was the rainiest season that we've ever had since I've lived here in Texas. So none of the drawers would slide in. So I started working out removing the paint from where the drawers slide, both the sides and all the little edges. And yeah, it still wasn't working. So I got my broken sander and tried to hold it together long enough to sand that down to get the drawer in. And I was getting closer and closer, and I just kept working at it. Until I finally got it to where it would go in there and be good. Much better. I also decided to remove the paint from the sides and the tops of all the drawers themselves, just to avoid that same issue to where they were coming together and there wasn't room for the paint. Yeah, I made a mess out of it. So I touched up where I had sanded and places you could see that didn't look very good without the paint, but I did this carefully without getting paint back into those areas so the drawers wouldn't be stuck that way. And I also put paste wax on all of the wooden slides of the drawers to make them go in and out easier. And we finally got there. It took a long time, and I did this in my garage where the lighting is horrible. So sorry about the grainy footage. But you should try to paint out there. There's a big old piece of glass that goes on the top of this, so that top will look really nice once that's on there. And my wife's super excited. She can't wait to fill those gigantic drawers up with stuff and spread out on that huge desk. Of course, I just found out we were moving, so that's a whole nother story. Thanks for watching.